Welcome to the John McAllister Report, where John McAllister, top football evaluator, interviews college and high school coaches and athletes from around the country. Sit back and enjoy today's podcast.
This is John McAllister, and I would like to welcome you to Around the State. Today, my guest is the head football coach at Toledo Central Catholic, Greg Dempsey. Greg and I have been friends for, decades now, but we've been friends for a long, long time. Excellent coach, excellent with kids and coaches, and knows football, and has won 3 state championships and over 200 victories. And I just respect him so much because he still enjoys it. He's a graduate of Toledo Central Catholic. He still enjoys it, and he has a lot to offer about philosophy and his thoughts on high school football. So sit back and enjoy my video podcast with Greg Dempsey, head football coach, Toledo Central Catholic. As I said earlier, today I'm reaching into the high school coaching ranks and doing a podcast with one of my favorite people I've known for a long time. And in fact, it goes back a long time. Greg is the head coach at Toledo Central Catholic, but I go back to when I met him through Doug Pearson, who was introduced to me by Rich Dardinger or something like that, the head baseball coach.
Rich Arbinger.
Now he got my first issues, Football Prospects of Ohio. And then one time he told me, he said, "Hey, I have a good friend who coaches for me, Doug Pearson." Now, I know Doug Pearson just by name, really. I don't know what he's like or anything like that, but we're joking. Okay, Greg, how are you today?
I'm great, John. How are you doing?
You're doing well, and you're the head football coach. So Monday, you have everything ready to go, or is that on by Wednesday? You have everything ready to go?
No, we go throughout the week. Like today, we'll work on red zone goal line packages today. We'll work on first down on Tuesday. We'll work third down on Wednesday, and then review everything on Thursday.
That's really good. And then hopefully win on Friday, right?
Good Lord willing.
Let's talk about wins first of all. 3 state titles?
Yes.
And over 200 victories. I don't know how many.
I can't give you an exact number myself, but yeah, we over 200.
And that's really good. Okay. Now, that's important because I remember the game against Joe Burrow, or Joey. I still call him that. In fact, when his dad told me that they were drawing Toledo Central Catholic, I said, they're going to beat the crap out of Joe Burrow. And they did. You guys did. But that guy came back every time except once. And he came back. In fact, he said, he told me, well, he's told other people too, but it's the worst loss he's ever had. This was going into last year. It's the worst loss he's ever had in his life. He was just so bummed out.
It was a crazy game. I was worried when we drew him because I had a coach tell me, you got to stop the quarterback, and that's easier said than done. And you're right. We hit him from the beginning, and it never bothered him. And that's a scary feeling when you're hitting a quarterback and it doesn't bother him.
Just get back up. It's really good. Greg, let's go. You're the head football coach at Toledo Central Catholic, but have worn so many hats. Tell us when you got there, then what did you do, and then how have you progressed? Tell me about the hats, because I think it's so important, because football coaches sometimes, it's changing now, but get stereotyped as not necessarily teaching a lot of classes. Some guys aren't into the classroom, but you've done a great job.
I've been blessed. You mentioned hats. I probably have had the weirdest uh, ascension ever in the building outside of football. I was hired as an English teacher when I came in 2000. After 5 years, being an alum also of the school, a 1990 graduate, they wanted to use me in development, and so they moved me into the development department with fundraising and alumni and things of that nature. And I ended up going back to school to get my master's, and a new president came in 2012, and he knew I was working on my administrative degree, and he made me an assistant principal. And then after that, a couple of years later, he goes, "You're the principal." We didn't even interview; he just told me he's doing it. And then 1 year later, that president brought me in the week of Memorial Day weekend and said, "I'm leaving. You're going to be the interim president of the school next year." So I've done it all, and then like you said, it was an interim thing because you can't be the president of the school and the head football coach, or they're both going to suffer. And at the end of that year, because it happened so late, they needed somebody to fill in that people knew and would have some faith and trust in, and a recognizable face. And I ended up hiring myself as the athletic director then at the end of that year.
And then you also are the head football coach, and of course that's only a 9 to 5 job. What, 7 months a year? I'm joking.
Seasonal.
Seasonal, that's right. But you also follow all the sports. I know I watch, and you're there with that, encouraging kids. And the other thing is the recruiting is so crazy, so that's got to take a lot of time. Your college recruiting is got to be so crazy.
I mean, I keep track of schools that come in because, you want to, when you're meeting with families, you want to let them know what schools have been through and they're having questions. I mean, we'll average between 70 and 100 schools coming through in a winter recruiting session, in the spring recruiting session. And, everybody thinks that's a great thing. And it is great that college recruiting and football still goes through the coaches in the school. That is great. But the work when you're dealing with that throughout the day, though, you get 4 or 5 coaches a day, and they're going to stay and visit. You still have to do your AD work, and now you're doing that at night. I mean, so it is definitely a huge part of the job, and a big time-consuming part of the job.
And it is. And then you have all these schools come through. You spend time with them, and then you still have kids that go out and get college recruiting services and pay a lot of money. I don't want to say, well, it's just me saying that, but I mean, it's too bad, but that's the way it is.
No doubt about it. There's so many different angles families and kids are getting hit at on the recruiting front. And the toughest thing is when dealing with families I'm very blunt, honest with them about recruiting. And it's when what you need to hear or what you want to hear. And that's usually what people will go hunting for, is what do you want to hear? And and you'll get somebody calling you up and saying, "Well, coach, this school's not calling us back." And I said, "Well, when you wanted to ask a girl to homecoming, son, and she never called you back, what did it mean?" I mean, it's a tough, hard truth to go through because it hurts kids inside, but it's the facts of what recruiting is nowadays, and it's only getting more difficult.
Yeah, it is. And I deal with it a lot. And I've had parents, I treat parents just like I did students when I taught high school and junior high. And they'll say, "Mr. McAllister, I need your opinion." And I said, "Okay, do you want your opinion or do you want my opinion?" And they laugh, and I tell parents the same way. What you want me to tell you what you think or what I think? And usually it stops there. But okay, let's talk. I think it's important because I followed your program for a long time, and you get really good players. I think good college prospects. Most of them are not totally developed yet. They're really good, but what do those guys have? What did the Sean Kaiser and Michael Warren and a tight end that went to Louisville and the offensive lineman, I think he's with the Browns right now. What do those guys have that and there are other kids I'm going to miss. I know that, and it's not your fault. But what do those guys have? What do your players have that make them go special?
You had Kaiser, you mentioned Michael Warren, Keith Tobridge, a tight end that went to Louisville, who's actually getting married this week. That's how old I'm getting. And then James Hudson, who's been starting the season for the Browns. Obviously everybody says they have the talent. They have the measurables and they have the talent. And I'd say about those four guys, and I definitely would throw a Dane Sanzenbacher in this thing.
Right.
They weren't just happy with their talent. I mean, they knew they had to work at it. You mentioned all four of those guys. Those were guys that embraced the weight room. Those are guys that embraced practice. Those were guys that would do the extra and not just the thing. And you can have talent, but everybody has talent at that level. What are you going to do to develop your talent? And I'll tell you what, they were coachable kids. All four of them were great learners. And even though sometimes people confuse having talent with knowing the game,
no,
and they grew with the game.
Yeah.
They learned it. They really worked hard at learning the game to become a better player, to enhance their talent.
I think I've told Dane Sanzenbacher this before. I think joked with you about it. Here's my Dane Sanzenbacher. I can't pronounce it for sure. Anyway, here's my story. I'm talking to Coach Tressel, and he asked me about Dane. I said, I really like him. I said, he can catch any. This is his high school. I said, he plays hard, but I just don't know what his flat out speed is. And what Coach Tressel said, well, he's run a 47 or 48, 400 meters. And I said, yeah, but that's not 40 yards. He says, but that tells, and I love Dane Sanzenbacher, don't worry. Oh. But I said, okay, he says, if he can do that all the time, that means if he can, he's really got endurance and speed. And he's tough. He's tough. I said,
no doubt.
That's what Coach Tressel told me. Of course, he doesn't miss too much often either, but it was my story on him.
When he offered him, he called me up. I remember calling me up to tell him to have him call him. And I go, so you're going to offer him? He goes, well, he was at our camp, and 5 kids I've offered on defense couldn't cover him, so I guess we better offer him.
And he's telling you the truth.
Yeah.
What is in your makeup that has driven you to be a very successful coach? Now, talent aside and all the other rumors aside and all that, but I've known you for a long time. What inside of you give me three qualities that you have?
Well, I mean, one, I'm at a place that I love, and it's important to me. It was important to me to try to make it as best as we could. And then once you get to that level, keeping it there and not doing that. Growing with the game, even though I don't know if I'm growing sometimes fast enough, you have to keep up with the times. I used to call defense, and then for staff reasons, I switched to offense. And then it used to be run the ball all the time. Now you're in the shotgun and trying to grow with that game and evolve and not be caught behind it. I'd say the probably my thing my wife thinks I need a psychiatrist for is I hate losing. I don't know if I like winning. I hate losing. And I've said to people before, I had somebody ask me this question last week, John, about, how after so many years you still go with the same. And I said, satisfaction is the first step towards finding defeat. And, you can talk about all the past championships, but I owe these kids that we have right now the same effort that any of those got. And just keeping that drive going. And when you lose that drive to want to win and not losing, and there's so many other lessons you teach the kids. We're talking pure football stuff right now, the football side of it. But I truly believe just wanting to win, hating to lose. And I truly believe, I tell people the football field's the biggest classroom on campus. And these kids, if you can learn how to win on a football field, you can apply those things a lot of places in your life. And you get to see that happen. And I just want to keep winning and do the best I can for this school.
Yeah, well, of course, you're talking to an old football coach, but to me, I know all the other sports, wrestling and basketball, they all give up stuff, but to watch kids out there in August in 90-degree weather, that says a lot to me. And other kids are swimming and going around, but your football players throughout Ohio are working, and that's so important. And
We were 4 days a week. We're 4 days a week starting in January, all the way till June. Then July, we use our 10 coaching days in July then, and then you're hitting it. Like you said, that's the coaches too. It's not just the
oh
kids.
my, you've had good high school coaches.
Oh,
And
I've
Nick,
been blessed to have a lot of guys. Yeah, Nick Toth, you mentioned, who was the head coach at Central Catholic when I came here as a freshman. Came back and won 2 state championships with us. I mean, I've been blessed. I've had a lot of former head coaches that have called me when they've got out of the head coaching gig. And if I go through this list, I'm going to forget 100 of them.
don't do that. Don't.
Right now, I'm blessed with the staff I have, with Ryan Brown running the defense and all the other guys we have. I mean, it is amazing how hardworking our staff is. And I'm not successful without them. You talk about good players. If it was me and all the good players, we aren't winning like this.
Plus, I see those guys out in July in 7-on-7s in Toledo, and I know you're really excited about doing that too. But that's a tough gig. You know, it's just year round. It's like you said. And so,
It's a full-time job. I tell people all the time, high school football, the way it needs to be done at certain schools, is a full-time job if it's being done right.
you know, I go, and this is not a knock on your program at all, but I go to your games, or I go to 7-on-7, go to your games, and before everything starts, it looks like mass confusion. I mean, guys are walking all over, guys are talking, guys now, and you had about 350 kids on the field, it seems like. But you have a lot of kids, but here's where I'm getting to. Once the whistle blows, they line up, they do their exercise. I mean, it's perfect. But, before that, it looks like a fire drill. I mean, it's crazy.
But it feels like it.
But once it starts, those guys work so hard. They line up, they're organized, they work hard, they run. And I just think that's a structure thing. And I think it's so cool. I mean, other schools are like that too. But your school just seems to get after it when they have to.
Yeah, I think it's important too. You have to let kids be kids. Yeah. This has to be fun. Yeah. But when it's time to work, it's time to work.
Exactly.
And you have to be able to flip that switch. And they do the same thing at practice, man. Coaches like that. But I always laugh when I see teachers or coaches talking about, well, these kids they're not serious enough, they're goofing off too much. But then when the adults get alone, they're sitting there telling jokes and hooting and hollering. You need to have fun doing this. Yeah. And the kids do. And I think we make it fun, but they know when it's business time too. And that's a lot to say about the assistants and the kids.
Well, I remember as a young coach, or I don't know if I was ever young, but as a coach, going up to St. Ignatius. First time I met Coach Kyle, and we've become really good friends, like same relationship you and I have. And Coach Kyle at St. Ignatius, and I go out before practice, even during practice, guys are sitting on their helmets, guys are taking a knee, guys are talking. And I mean, this is all, but they win. And I think it's a little bit like him, like Coach Kyle. They just know what buttons to push, and they know the kids need to relax and everything. And
I agree. You know what? If he's doing it, we all should be doing it, because he's the best that's ever done it.
He's pretty good. He's pretty good. Okay, let's talk about, this is really good. I'm glad we don't talk about X and O's. I'm glad we don't talk about that stuff, because that's not going to help anybody. This kind of conversation helps people, I think. Okay, now 2 more things I have written down here. What about the new conference, real quickly? What can you say? Is it you're moving to going to Detroit, I think?
Yes.
Does that look pretty good? Or are there a lot of speed bumps, a lot of wrinkles right now, or anything new is speed bumps? Anything new?
Exactly. I think there's always going to be stuff when change happens.
Right.
There's things you've thought about and it's going to be an issue and you have to work with it. What are the things you don't know about? I think that, and that's across the board. I'm more worried as an athletic director than I am as a football coach about this.
Right.
Football, once you have a football schedule, it's pretty simple and pretty routine. You know that. I think it's going to be much tougher football-wise in terms of that top to bottom of our conference is going to be something. And there's a lot of good football up there, a lot of good players. the travel. Everybody talks about the travel. The travel's an hour and 15. We're doing that 3 times a season already. That's nothing. I mean, nowadays people travel on planes to have their kids play sports.
Right.
Driving an hour north isn't a big deal. But the depth we're going to see in the football we're going to see is much different than we've seen in recent history, and that's going to be a big adjustment in terms of not just in season but off season, preparing your kids for the grind that you're going to face.
You're right. Now I have one question on that, and then we'll go to something else. Last thing, you talked about the adjustment and the grind going up there and all that stuff, and which is super. But what about Greg? What about the playoff system then? Will it be the same, or what? Like when you say you beat 2 Detroit teams, is that the same as beating St. John's and St. Francis in the playoff?
We have to submit whenever we've played. We've had to play a lot of out of state
Right.
teams, like many other schools have, because it's been a challenge scheduling non-conference.
Right.
And anytime we played out of state, you have to submit that, get their enrollment, get that to OHSAA, so then they can follow that team. And the computer points are their enrollment of those schools is adjusted to Ohio, and they're given it a divisional assignment for Harvard points then. So it doesn't affect the playoffs, but it's a little more work on our end. But it's nice to have a conference and a home and a consistent schedule also.
Yeah, I like it. My last question or topic, I think the NCAA football is broken right now. In fact, really broken. Just my thoughts. Okay. And you're going to see that top Power 5, maybe not all the schools, whole new conference, a whole new Division I, AAA or AA. And then you're going to see the Toledos of the world. They're going to be one step below that. The Bowling Greens, Toledos, and, bigger schools than that, really.
Yeah.
But, okay, so we don't worry about that. I think we can talk about it maybe some other time in this fall, talk about recruiting, or in December, because it's going to be crazier. What I like in Ohio is with the playoff system, I don't necessarily like that extra game, but because I think the OHSA is just out to make money. But what it's forcing what guys do now, bigs play bigs. You opened up with St. Ed's.
Yeah.
And whether teams don't want to schedule you or what, but St. Ed's a pretty good football program, and you took a lump, but you still can make the playoffs. I guess bigs are playing bigs, and any level, Division II, but I call it bigs versus big, because if they lose 1 or 2 games, they still make the playoffs.
Oh yeah, we're a Division IV school by enrollment.
Yeah.
Due to competitive balance, we're Division II. But when Eds came open, we scrimmage Akron Hoban. We've played Eds. And our depth's not as good as Eds. We lost this year by 3 in the fourth quarter, and depth was a big part of that, probably. Depth and a couple costly mistakes. And, some of those schools have, but man, does it prepare you. Wow. I've had years where when you're young and you're worried about just getting the wins, let's be honest, you're scheduling some wins early on. You're thinking you're pretty good, and you find out week 5 you have these problems that you didn't know you had for 5 weeks. You come off an Ed's game and a Hoban scrimmage, you know what your problems are, and you know what you got to deal with. And that's the biggest thing I've told our guys at times, besides preparing for the kids. And I think giving the kids the opportunities to play those programs is huge. There's a couple others I would still want to play in Ohio and hopefully get to work that out eventually. But just finding out we're weak here or we're strong there, because if you're doing stuff against those teams, well, you're pretty good at it probably. The things they're getting you on.
I was going to say, and those teams aren't exactly kicking the heck out of you.
Oh yeah, we've been competitive, which is nice.
Scoring 7 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. They're pretty competitive and stuff.
The Eds game this year, in terms of, I hate losing, like I said, but it was a fun game to coach, because you know what? I know I hear the same thing probably over there. They have all the best players. Well, I'll tell you what, Tom Lombardo and his staff are pretty dang good coaches too.
They're coaches.
When you talk about having talent, you and I both have seen people that have had talent and messed it up. So there's a little bit to be said for that. And that's fun going against those staffs early in the season, those types of staffs, because those are the types of staffs you can see when you're playing in the playoffs against Medina Highland, Avon, and I'm sure I'm forgetting many, many more.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time here. I shoot for 20 and we're a little over that, 20 minutes, but I really appreciate the time. Okay. You've done a great job. You're doing a great job and you're good with kids. A little rough with kids, but you're still good with them. No, I'm joking. But
hey, tough love's a good thing.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's been our relationship over all it's decades now. Holy cow. Is one of the ones I definitely value. And you've done a lot for kids also, let's be honest.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. You have a good night. Good.